They laughed when a millionaire let a homeless boy stay in his car, then saw him at the grave. Before starting to watch this story, tell us in the comments section from which city you're watching this story. Let's enjoy this story. It was a cold, rainy evening in Seattle, and the city streets were unusually quiet. Most people had already hurried indoors to escape the biting wind and relentless drizzle. Josh Preston, a successful real estate tycoon, was wrapping up his late-night meeting at a downtown hotel. As he made his way toward his black Mercedes parked under the dim glow of a street lamp, he noticed a small, hunched figure near the passenger door. A boy, barely in his teens, was curled up on the wet pavement, his worn-out hoodie soaked through, shivering uncontrollably. Josh paused, his first instinct telling him to ignore it and get inside the warm car. He had places to be and no time for street drama. Yet something about the boy's defeated posture pulled at his conscience. Stepping closer, he cleared his throat. "Hey kid, you okay?" he asked, trying to sound less intimidating than his towering presence often did. The boy didn't respond immediately, just lifted his head slightly, revealing pale, gaunt cheeks and tired blue eyes. "I'm fine," the boy mumbled, though his voice cracked with the chill. Josh hesitated, unsure whether to push further. But he couldn't just leave. "Where are your parents?" he tried again. The boy swallowed hard, glancing down. "Don't have any. Just trying to get out of the rain." Josh's gaze softened. He had grown up in a modest household himself, struggling through his youth until he made something of himself. The memory stirred a long-forgotten empathy within him. He unlocked the car and gestured to the boy. "Look, it's warmer in here. You can sit inside for a bit. Just until the rain eases up." The boy looked at him with a mix of suspicion and hope. Josh pulled open the passenger door, and the boy hesitated only a moment before sliding in. Once inside, Josh cranked up the heat and the boy leaned back, relief evident on his face. They sat in silence for a few minutes, the sound of raindrops pattering against the windshield filling the car. Finally, Josh broke the quiet. "What's your name?" "Tommy," the boy replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Josh nodded, trying not to pry too much. "Where have you been staying?" Tommy shrugged, staring at his mud-caked sneakers. "Here and there. Mostly under bridges or in shelters when there's space. Been a rough few weeks." Josh couldn't imagine living like that, especially at such a young age. He glanced at his phone, aware of the time ticking by, but he couldn't bring himself to just drop Tommy back on the street. A few pedestrians passed by, giving curious, almost judgmental looks at the odd pair in the car. A wealthy man in a tailored suit and a drenched, disheveled kid. Josh ignored them. "You hungry?" he asked. Tommy nodded cautiously, as if unsure whether to believe his luck. Josh reached into the back seat, pulling out a takeout bag from the hotel's restaurant. "It's just a sandwich and fries." "Go ahead." Tommy's eyes widened, and he dug into the food without a second thought. Josh leaned back, watching the boy devour the meal, realizing how long it must have been since he'd eaten properly. He thought about calling someone, social services maybe, but the idea of Tommy being lost in the system didn't sit right. "How long have you been on your own?" he asked. Tommy wiped his mouth with his sleeve, hesitant. "A few months. My mom passed away last year and my stepdad, he wasn't too nice. I couldn't take it anymore. Ran away." Josh clenched his jaw, anger simmering at the thought of a child enduring that. "You didn't think of going to the police?" Tommy shook his head vehemently. "I'd rather be on my own. Cops just send you back or put you somewhere worse." Josh understood more than he wanted to. The boy wasn't just homeless, he was running from something far more painful. As Tommy finished the sandwich, he looked up, eyes full of wary gratitude. "Why are you being nice to me?" he asked. Josh wasn't sure how to answer. He usually kept his emotions guarded, his life structured and controlled. But tonight, seeing the boy huddled against the car, something had cracked through his well-built armor. "Maybe because someone once helped me when I needed it," he replied, more to himself than to Tommy. As the rain started to let up, Josh knew he couldn't just leave the kid back on the street. "Look, I have a guest room at my place. You can stay for a few days, just until we figure something out." Tommy's eyes widened with disbelief, almost as if he thought it was a cruel joke. "Seriously?" Josh nodded. "Just for a few days. You'll be safe." The boy hesitated, but the lure of a warm bed was too much to resist. Josh couldn't help but notice the hopeful spark in his eyes, one that had probably been extinguished long ago. He started the car, guiding it smoothly through the slick streets toward his spacious condo. As they drove, he noticed Tommy drifting off, exhaustion finally catching up. Josh adjusted the heating, making sure the boy was comfortable. He didn't know why he was doing this, why he, of all people, was taking in a runaway. Perhaps it was guilt from his past, or maybe it was just the simple human need to help someone who had nobody. When they finally reached the building, the doorman gave Josh a quizzical look but didn't question him. As they entered the condo, Tommy couldn't hide his awe at the high ceilings, modern decor and expansive view of the cityscape glittering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Josh showed him the guest room, its plush bed and neatly folded blankets looking foreign to the boy. "You can take a shower if you want. There are some spare clothes in the closet," Josh offered, keeping his tone casual. Tommy nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Josh left him to settle in, retreating to his own room where he couldn't help but ponder what he'd just done. He knew his friends would laugh at him. Taking a homeless kid? They would say he'd lost his mind. Yet somehow he didn't care. As he leaned against the window looking out at the rain-soaked city, he couldn't help but wonder whether he was making a mistake or doing something right for once. He didn't know what the next few days would hold, but for the first time in years, he felt something more than just the hollow satisfaction of financial success. There was a warmth, fragile yet real, that maybe he could help this boy find his way back to a better life. In the quiet of the night, as Tommy's soft breathing came from the guest room, Josh couldn't help but feel that, despite all logic, he had done the right thing. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the large windows of Josh's condo, casting golden streaks across the polished wooden floor. Josh stirred awake, momentarily disoriented as he heard muffled noises from the guest room. For a split second, he wondered if the events of the previous night had been just a vivid dream. But reality hit when he remembered Tommy, the homeless boy he had brought home. Quietly, Josh got up and made his way to the guest room. The door was slightly ajar and he could hear the sound of water running. Relief washed over him. At least the boy was still there. Part of him had feared Tommy might slip away before morning, too scared or mistrustful to stay. While waiting, Josh decided to make breakfast. He wasn't much of a cook, but scrambled eggs and toast seemed manageable. As the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the kitchen, Tommy appeared, hair still damp from his shower, wearing a simple gray sweatshirt and jeans Josh had left out. The clothes were a bit big on him, but at least he looked cleaner, less like a stray cat caught in a storm. Tommy hesitated at the kitchen entrance, clearly unsure whether to sit or wait for an invitation. Josh glanced over his shoulder, offering a casual smile. "Morning. Hungry?" Tommy nodded, his usual guarded expression softened by sleep and warmth. Josh gestured to the counter where he was plating up the eggs. "Take a seat." Tommy cautiously took a stool, his fingers nervously tapping on the edge of the marble countertop. Josh slid the plate over to him and poured a glass of orange juice. "Hope you like eggs." Tommy picked up the fork, his movements careful, almost as if he thought this might all disappear. After a few bites, he glanced up, his blue eyes reflecting a glimmer of gratitude. "Thanks for last night," he murmured. Josh shrugged it off, not wanting to make the kid uncomfortable. "No problem. You sleep okay?" Tommy nodded, chewing slowly. "I can't remember the last time I slept on a bed. Or felt safe." Josh wasn't sure how to respond, so he took a sip of coffee, letting the silence stretch comfortably. After a while, he decided to tackle the elephant in the room. "So, Tommy, any idea what you're gonna do next?" The boy froze, his fork midair before setting it down. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've been moving from place to place. Just trying to stay out of trouble." Josh leaned against the counter, considering his next words carefully. "I meant what I said last night. You can stay here for a few days while we figure something out. Maybe contact someone who can help you long-term." Tommy's face fell, clearly worried that he might be sent back to wherever he had run from. Josh sensed his fear. "I'm not saying I'll hand you over to the cops or anything," he clarified. "But living on the streets isn't safe. You know that." Tommy didn't respond, just picked at his eggs, lost in thought. Josh decided to change the subject to lighten the mood. "So, you like basketball?" he asked, nodding toward the TV where a replay of a Seattle Supersonics game was on. Tommy perked up a little. "Yeah, I used to play at the community center before, you know?" Josh smiled. "Maybe we'll shoot some hoops later. I've got a court on the rooftop." Tommy's eyes widened with interest, but he quickly masked his excitement as if afraid to seem too eager. After breakfast, Josh gave Tommy a brief tour of the condo, showing him the small library, the office where he worked from home on most days, and finally the rooftop terrace with its view of Puget Sound. Tommy seemed overwhelmed, as if he had stepped into a different world. Josh couldn't help but notice how the boy kept his distance from anything too luxurious, as if fearing he might break something just by touching it. By late morning, Josh needed to attend a few virtual meetings. He set Tommy up with a tablet and showed him how to access some games. Tommy sat on the edge of the plush leather couch, clearly trying to make himself as small as possible. Before heading to his office, Josh paused at the doorway. "If you need anything, just holler. I'll be done in a few hours." Tommy gave a small nod, eyes already glued to the screen, cautiously exploring the device. As Josh settled into his work, his thoughts kept drifting back to the boy in the next room. What had his life been like before it fell apart? Josh couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Tommy's story than just running away from an abusive stepfather. When the meetings wrapped up, Josh returned to find Tommy still on the couch, now engrossed in a nature documentary about wild horses. Josh sat down across from him, noting how relaxed Tommy seemed when he thought no one was watching. "Learning something new?" Josh teased lightly. Tommy shrugged, his cheeks flushing slightly. "It's just cool. Never seen anything like this before." They spent the afternoon shooting hoops on the rooftop court. Tommy wasn't as rusty as Josh had expected, managing a few decent shots despite his obvious lack of practice. At one point, Tommy almost laughed when he managed to trick Josh with a quick feint, but the sound died on his lips as if he wasn't used to expressing happiness. Josh pretended not to notice, but inside he felt a surge of determination to help this kid rediscover what it meant to just be a normal teenager. As the evening approached, Josh made pasta for dinner, letting Tommy help by grating cheese and setting the table. When they finally sat down to eat, the boy was noticeably more at ease, even offering a few stories about his favorite basketball players. Josh listened, genuinely interested, grateful to see the boy's defenses lowering. Later that night, as the city lights glowed through the large windows, Josh handed Tommy a set of fresh pajamas and some basic toiletries. As Tommy headed to his room, he turned back awkwardly. "Josh, thanks for everything," he said softly. Josh just gave a nod, not wanting to make the moment too heavy. "Get some rest. We'll figure things out tomorrow." After Tommy disappeared into the guest room, Josh sank onto the living room couch, his thoughts swirling. He knew taking Tommy in was risky and unorthodox, but he couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that he was doing the right thing. His phone buzzed with a message from his business partner, asking if he was still planning to attend the charity gala next weekend. For a moment, Josh wondered what it would be like to take Tommy to an event like that, to show him a world where people weren't always fighting to survive. As the condo fell into silence, Josh couldn't help but feel a strange sense of peace. Maybe this was a second chance for both of them, a chance to heal old wounds and build something that resembled a family. Sleep came easily that night, and for the first time in a long while, Josh didn't feel so alone. Before going to next, please subscribe to our channel, like and share with friends. The morning sun peeked through the blinds, casting thin lines of light across the living room. Josh woke up on the couch, his neck stiff from an awkward sleeping position. Rubbing his eyes, he glanced at the guest room door, relieved to see it still closed. He had half expected Tommy to disappear in the night, retreating back to the streets, too accustomed to being on his own to trust anyone's kindness. Stretching, Josh shuffled to the kitchen, deciding to make pancakes. As the smell of melted butter and syrup filled the air, the door to the guest room creaked open and Tommy emerged, his hair sticking up at odd angles. Josh couldn't help but smile. "Morning, sleepyhead. You good?" Tommy gave a slight nod, rubbing his eyes. "Yeah. I guess I just forgot what it feels like to sleep through the night." Josh poured batter onto the hot griddle, the sizzle filling the room. "You like pancakes?" Tommy shrugged but didn't protest when a plate was set in front of him. Watching the boy carefully spread syrup, as if unsure how much he was allowed, Josh wondered again just how tough life had been for him. As they ate, Tommy seemed more relaxed than the night before. He even asked Josh a few hesitant questions about the city and what kind of work he did. Josh explained his real estate business in simple terms, but he could tell that Tommy wasn't particularly interested in buildings or property investments. When he mentioned his involvement in community programs to support underprivileged youth, though, Tommy's eyes lit up. "You help kids like, who don't have much?" Tommy asked, trying to sound casual. Josh nodded. "Yeah, I sponsor a few shelters around the city. Sometimes I visit and talk to the kids. Let them know they have options." Tommy looked thoughtful, his fork scraping the plate as he considered this new side of Josh. After breakfast, Josh suggested they go out for a bit, maybe explore Pike Place Market or walk along the waterfront. Tommy hesitated, glancing down at his borrowed clothes, but Josh reassured him. "You look fine. Trust me." They took the elevator down to the lobby, where the doorman gave Tommy a curious glance but didn't comment. Outside, the city was alive with the usual morning bustle. Buses rumbling by, people hurrying to work, street vendors setting up shop. Josh noticed Tommy sticking close, almost as if afraid of being left behind. As they reached Pike Place Market, the chaotic mix of fishmongers yelling prices, tourists snapping photos, and the smell of fresh flowers seemed to overwhelm the boy at first. Josh guided him through the crowd, stopping at a small bakery to buy some pastries. They sat on a bench overlooking Elliott Bay, sharing a cinnamon roll. Tommy bit into his half, the sweetness making his eyes widen in delight. Josh couldn't help but laugh at the expression. "Pretty good, huh?" Tommy just nodded, wiping sticky fingers on his jeans. A few minutes later, a group of teenagers walked by, laughing and shoving each other playfully. One of them accidentally bumped into Tommy, who instantly tensed, his body language shifting from relaxed to defensive. Josh saw the change and gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's okay. Just an accident," he reassured. Tommy looked down, clearly embarrassed by his reaction. Trying to lighten the mood, Josh pointed at the street performers setting up nearby, a man juggling knives while balancing on a board and a young woman singing folk songs with a battered guitar. Tommy seemed intrigued, the tension slowly leaving his frame as he watched the performers. As they wandered through the market, Tommy kept glancing at different stalls, his curiosity barely contained. Josh stopped at a small booth selling handmade bracelets and let Tommy pick one. He chose a simple leather band with a silver bead, clearly uncomfortable with taking anything more expensive. The vendor smiled warmly, complimenting Tommy's choice, and Josh could see a hint of pride in the boy's face. They moved on, stopping at the famous fish-throwing stall. When one of the workers saw Tommy's wide-eyed look, he grinned and tossed a wrapped fish right at him. Instinctively, Tommy caught it, nearly dropping it in surprise. The crowd clapped, and for the first time, Josh saw a real, unguarded smile on the boy's face. They walked back to the car with the smell of the ocean lingering in the air. Josh couldn't help but notice how much Tommy had opened up during the outing, even joking a little on the way back. Back at the condo, Josh set up the kitchen island with snacks and suggested they watch a movie. Tommy picked an old comedy from Josh's collection, and they both laughed at the cheesy jokes and slapstick scenes. As the movie played, Tommy leaned back, visibly more comfortable than he had been since arriving. Josh was surprised at how natural it felt to have someone else around. For years, he had been so caught up in work and business that he hadn't realized how lonely his life had become. Watching Tommy relax and enjoy himself stirred something in Josh, an almost paternal instinct he hadn't thought possible. That evening, as the sky turned a dusky pink over the Seattle skyline, Tommy grew quieter. Sensing something on his mind, Josh turned off the TV and waited. Finally Tommy spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why are you being so nice to me? I mean, you don't even know me." Josh looked at him, unsure how to put it into words. "Maybe because I know what it's like to feel alone," he said after a pause. "I had a rough time growing up too. Not like you, but still tough. Sometimes people gave me a chance. Made all the difference." Tommy seemed to mull this over, his fingers absent-mindedly playing with the bracelet. "I don't get why my stepdad hated me so much. I didn't do anything wrong," he murmured, his voice cracking. Josh felt a pang of sadness, wishing he could erase the hurt from the boy's past. "It's not your fault," he said firmly. "Some people just don't know how to care. But that doesn't mean you don't deserve better." Tommy glanced up, his eyes bright with unspoken emotions. "You really mean that?" Josh gave a reassuring nod. "Absolutely. You're a good kid. You just need someone to believe in you." Tommy seemed to relax, a hint of a smile returning. "Thanks," he whispered. As the evening stretched into night, Josh ordered pizza, and they ate on the living room floor talking about basketball and favorite movies. Tommy seemed lighter, as if finally allowing himself to enjoy the moment without constantly looking over his shoulder. When it was time to sleep, Tommy didn't hesitate to head back to the guest room, mumbling a good night. After he closed the door, Josh sat alone for a while, staring at the flickering city lights. He knew there was still so much to figure out, but for the first time in years he didn't feel like his success was just an empty achievement. The condo felt fuller, more alive, and Josh realized that maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something he hadn't even known he needed. He had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but he was willing to find out. Before going to next, please subscribe to our channel, like and share with friends. The next few days passed in a routine that felt surprisingly normal. Josh would spend his mornings working from his home office while Tommy busied himself with the tablet, exploring games or watching documentaries. Sometimes Josh would catch glimpses of him flipping through the old books on the living room shelf, his finger tracing the words as if trying to decipher their meaning. It didn't take long for Josh to notice that Tommy struggled with reading. One evening while they were sitting at the dinner table, Josh casually mentioned it. You know, if you ever want help with reading, I could teach you a few things. No pressure. Tommy froze, a forkful of pasta halfway to his mouth. His cheeks flushed with embarrassment. I'm not good at it, he mumbled, clearly uncomfortable. Josh gave a light shrug. Hey, everyone starts somewhere. I wasn't a great reader at your age either. Had a teacher who sat with me every day after school. Help me catch up. We could do that if you want. Tommy glanced at him, wary but intrigued. You'd do that? Josh just smiled and nodded. That night, as they sat in the living room, Josh handed Tommy a worn copy of The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Let's start with something fun, he suggested. Tommy looked at the cover skeptically. It looks old, he remarked, running his fingers over the faded title. It is. But it's about a boy who runs away and finds himself on an unexpected journey. Kind of fitting, right? Tommy didn't argue, and Josh opened the book, reading the first few pages aloud. Tommy listened intently, his eyes following along. After a while, Josh encouraged him to try a paragraph. Tommy stumbled over some words, but Josh corrected him gently, never showing frustration. Bit by bit, Tommy relaxed, his voice growing more confident as they moved through the pages. By the time they wrapped up for the night, Tommy's face showed a quiet satisfaction, a sense of accomplishment he hadn't felt in a long time. The following day, Josh had to attend a charity event in downtown Seattle. He debated whether to take Tommy along, but the boy seemed hesitant when Josh mentioned it. I don't really fit in with people like that, Tommy admitted, his tone laced with insecurity. Josh knelt to his level, resting a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Hey, they're just people. And you've got nothing to prove to anyone. You're worth just as much as any of them. Tommy didn't seem convinced, but Josh decided not to push him. Instead, he promised to be back by early evening and left Tommy with a list of things to watch on the streaming service. At the event, Josh found it hard to focus. His business partners chatted about new developments and investment opportunities, but his mind kept wandering back to the condo, wondering if Tommy was okay. When one of his colleagues, Mark, asked what had been keeping him so preoccupied lately, Josh hesitated. He didn't want to explain. He knew they wouldn't understand. They would just see a reckless decision, a millionaire taking in a homeless kid. So he shrugged it off, making some vague comment about being busy with community work. When Josh finally got home, he was surprised to find Tommy not in the living room but on the balcony, sitting cross-legged with the book in his lap. Josh approached quietly, hearing the boy muttering lines under his breath, practicing. Tommy looked up, startled, but then relaxed when he saw it was just Josh. I didn't know you were back, he said. Josh smiled, impressed by his dedication. Reading on your own now, huh? Tommy nodded, a little sheepishly. Figured I'd try. It's kind of interesting. Huck reminds me of someone. Josh raised an eyebrow. You? Tommy didn't respond directly, but his thoughtful expression said enough. Deciding to seize the moment, Josh pulled up a chair next to him. You know, I didn't just pick that book by chance. Huck is brave, resourceful, and knows how to survive on his own. But he also learns that trusting someone doesn't make you weak. Sometimes it makes you stronger. Tommy didn't say anything, just kept his eyes on the pages, but Josh could tell he was listening. That night, as they ate grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup for dinner, Tommy seemed more talkative than usual. He asked Josh about his own childhood, and Josh shared bits and pieces. How his father had worked 2 jobs and his mother had taught him to cook because she couldn't stand the thought of him living on fast food once he moved out. Tommy listened with quiet fascination, and for the first time, Josh realized how little Tommy had heard stories about ordinary family life. After they cleaned up, Tommy surprised Josh by asking if they could read another chapter before bed. They settled on the couch, and this time Tommy read aloud, stumbling less, his voice stronger and more confident. When they reached a tricky passage, Josh would gently correct him, and Tommy would nod, determined to get it right. The next morning, while Josh was in his office, he heard a knock at the door. Puzzled, he opened it to find Susan, his neighbor from down the hall. She looked curious, her eyes darting past him into the apartment. Hey Josh. Just checking in. Saw a boy with you the other day. Is everything okay? Josh hesitated, knowing that gossip traveled fast in the building. Yeah, it's a long story. Just helping him out for a while. Susan nodded, her expression softening. That's really kind of you. If you ever need anything, just let me know. Kids can be a handful. Josh gave a grateful nod, glad that Susan wasn't pressing too hard. As he closed the door, he found Tommy standing nearby, having overheard. People always want to know everything, Tommy muttered, a hint of defensiveness in his tone. Josh shrugged. They're just curious. It's human nature. Later that evening, as they were watching a comedy show, Tommy suddenly turned serious. You're not gonna just get tired of me and send me back, right? The question caught Josh off guard. He paused the TV and looked at Tommy, choosing his words carefully. I'm not planning on that. But we do need to think about what's next. Maybe find someone who can help long-term. Someone who understands what you've been through. Tommy seemed to shrink back, the spark in his eyes fading. I don't want to go to some shelter, he whispered. Josh sighed, wishing he had a better answer. I know. But I also want you to be safe. We'll figure it out together, okay? As they sat in the quiet living room, Josh felt a wave of protectiveness wash over him. This boy, so resilient yet fragile, had unknowingly brought something important back into Josh's life. A sense of purpose that had been missing for far too long. He wasn't sure where this journey would lead, but for the first time in years he was willing to take the risk. Tommy deserved that much, and maybe Josh needed it just as badly. Before going to next, please subscribe to our channel, like and share with friends. One rainy afternoon, Josh found himself staring out the window, his thoughts swirling around Tommy and the uncertain future that lay ahead. He had been making phone calls all morning trying to find someone who could help with Tommy's situation, but the responses were frustratingly similar. Either the shelters were full, or the social workers seemed indifferent, treating Tommy as just another case number. Feeling a surge of helplessness, Josh decided to take a break and see what Tommy was up to. He found the boy in the guest room, hunched over a notebook with a pencil gripped tightly in his hand. Curious, Josh leaned in and saw crude sketches of cars, some with flames on the sides, others with exaggerated spoilers. You like drawing? He asked. Tommy quickly closed the notebook, his cheeks flushing with embarrassment. It's nothing, he muttered. Josh smiled. It's actually pretty cool. You ever thought about designing cars? Tommy shrugged, clearly not used to being complimented. I just like thinking about stuff that goes fast. Makes me feel free, you know? Josh nodded, understanding more than he could put into words. That evening they made spaghetti together, with Josh guiding Tommy through chopping vegetables and stirring the sauce. The kitchen filled with the rich aroma of garlic and tomatoes, and for the first time, Tommy seemed genuinely engaged, asking questions about the ingredients and why they used fresh herbs instead of dried. Josh realized that for Tommy, even cooking was an adventure, something new and exciting compared to his previous life of scavenging and surviving. After dinner they settled on the couch to watch an old action movie. Tommy was mesmerized by the high-speed car chases, and Josh couldn't help but notice how the boy's eyes lit up with every screech of tires and roar of the engines. I used to have a car like that, Josh mentioned during one particularly intense scene. Really? Tommy asked, eyes wide with disbelief. Josh chuckled. Yeah, back before I got all responsible. I restored it myself. Took forever, but it was worth it. Tommy seemed fascinated, and Josh promised to show him some photos later. The next day, Josh took Tommy to a local auto repair shop owned by his old friend, David. The place smelled of oil and grease, and the sound of clanking metal echoed through the air. David greeted Josh with a hearty handshake, his eyes narrowing slightly when he noticed Tommy. Who's the kid? He asked, wiping his hands on a rag. This is Tommy. Thought I'd show him around. He's into cars, Josh explained. David gave Tommy a once-over, his expression softening when he saw the boy's obvious excitement at the array of car parts and engines scattered around. Well, you're in the right place, kid, David said with a grin. You know anything about engines? Tommy shook his head. Not really. Just like how they sound. David laughed. That's a start. Come on, I'll show you the shop. As they walked through the cluttered workspace, David explained how different parts worked and even let Tommy hold a wrench, showing him how to loosen a bolt. Tommy was a quick learner, eagerly soaking up every bit of information. At one point, David turned to Josh, his voice low. What's his story? Josh hesitated before giving a brief rundown of how he'd found Tommy. David raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. You've got a good heart, Josh. Just be careful. Kids like that, they've seen too much too young. Takes more than a warm bed to fix that. Josh knew David was right, but he wasn't willing to give up on Tommy. Not after seeing how much the boy had already opened up. On the way back home, Tommy was uncharacteristically quiet, his mind clearly racing with thoughts. Josh glanced over, trying to break the silence. Did you have fun today? Tommy nodded but didn't elaborate. After a moment he spoke up, his voice almost a whisper. You think I could learn how to fix cars? Like for real? Josh smiled, glad to see a spark of ambition in the boy's eyes. Absolutely. David would probably be happy to teach you. He's good with kids once he warms up. Tommy's face lit up at the prospect, but then he grew serious again. You really think I could have a normal life someday? Like get a job and all that? Josh pulled the car to a stop at a red light and looked at Tommy. Of course you can. You just need someone to believe in you. And a bit of a fresh start. Tommy didn't respond, but his expression softened, as if he was daring to hope for the first time in a long while. That night, as they sat down for another reading session, Josh noticed Tommy seemed more focused, almost eager to practice. They made it through 2 chapters without any interruptions, and Tommy even laughed at one of Huck's misadventures. As they wrapped up, Tommy leaned back and asked, "You ever wonder why some people get good lives and others just don't?" Josh thought for a moment before answering. "I think a lot of it is luck. Where you're born, who your family is. But sometimes, even when things start out bad, you can change how it ends. It's just a lot harder when the world keeps knocking you down." Tommy looked down at the bracelet on his wrist, tracing the bead with his thumb. "Yeah. Feels like I've been knocked down a lot. But it's different here. Feels safe." Josh's chest tightened, realizing how much the boy needed that feeling of security. "You're safe here, Tommy. You don't have to keep looking over your shoulder. No one's going to hurt you." Tommy nodded, but his silence spoke volumes. Trust was still new to him, and Josh knew it would take more than a few kind words to erase years of fear. Later that night, as Tommy slept, Josh stayed up, making calls to more shelters and even a few private organizations that specialized in helping homeless teens. Each conversation was a reminder of how complicated the situation was. He wasn't a guardian, and legally he didn't have the right to keep Tommy indefinitely. But the thought of sending him back to the streets was unthinkable. Josh knew he needed to find a solution soon. Tommy deserved a stable home and a chance to build a future. As he glanced at the closed guest room door, Josh made a promise to himself that he wouldn't let Tommy become just another statistic. Maybe he didn't have all the answers, but he wasn't about to abandon the boy who had unexpectedly become part of his life. As the days passed, Josh found himself more and more invested in Tommy's future. The boy had started showing genuine interest in learning, whether it was about cars, reading, or even simple life skills. It was as if a whole new world had opened up for him, and Josh was more than happy to guide him. They continued to visit David's auto shop every Saturday, where Tommy began helping out more, slowly learning the ropes of engine repairs and small tasks around the garage. It was a start, but Josh knew it wouldn't be enough. Tommy needed something more stable, a sense of permanence that he had never known. The uncertainty of his past life weighed heavily on him, and Josh could see that every now and then Tommy would get quiet, lost in thought, as if something was eating away at him. Josh didn't press. He had learned that pushing too hard only made things worse. But he made a mental note to be there when the boy was ready to talk. One Sunday afternoon, Josh decided to take Tommy to a local park. The sun was out, the sky clear, and it felt like a perfect opportunity to break away from the routine. They walked along the winding paths, passing families enjoying picnics, couples holding hands and kids playing soccer. For the first time in a while, Tommy seemed to be enjoying himself, his usual guarded demeanor softened by the simple joy of being in the open air. As they sat on a bench near a small pond, Josh broke the silence. "You ever think about what you want to do with your life, Tommy?" Tommy looked at him, his brow furrowed. "I dunno. I never really had the chance to think about it before. Just trying to survive, you know?" Josh nodded, understanding all too well. "I get it. But now that you're safe, you've got time to think about things. You can dream a little. What would you do if nothing was holding you back?" Tommy stared at the pond, his eyes distant. After a long pause he spoke. "I think I'd want to fix cars. Like really fix them. Not just the engines but everything, make them look nice, make them run smooth. I used to watch people drive around in nice cars and I thought, that could be me someday. But I never thought it was possible." Josh smiled, feeling a surge of pride for the boy. "It's more than possible. We'll figure it out together." They spent the rest of the afternoon at the park, chatting about Tommy's interests and what he wanted to learn. It was a simple conversation, but it meant the world to both of them. For Josh, it was the first glimpse of hope for Tommy's future, a future that didn't involve living on the streets. For Tommy, it was the beginning of something that had always seemed out of reach, believing in a future at all. As the weeks passed, things began to settle into a routine. Tommy spent more time at the auto shop, learning under David's watchful eye. Josh helped him with his reading and even began teaching him basic financial literacy, how to budget, save, and plan for the future. He wanted to equip Tommy with all the tools he needed to succeed, not just as a mechanic, but as someone who could stand on his own 2 feet in the world. But even as things began to improve, Josh couldn't shake the feeling that there was something Tommy wasn't telling him. The boy was still holding on to something, a secret he wasn't ready to share. Josh wasn't about to push him, but he knew that trust was a fragile thing, and it would take time for Tommy to fully open up. One night, after a particularly long day at the shop, Tommy came home looking more tired than usual. Josh noticed the slump in his shoulders and the far-off look in his eyes. "You okay?" he asked, concern in his voice. Tommy nodded, but it wasn't convincing. "Just a long day," he muttered, shrugging it off. Josh didn't press, but he could tell something was wrong. Later that evening, as they sat together watching a movie, Tommy suddenly stood up and walked out onto the balcony. Josh followed him, finding him leaning against the railing, staring at the dark skyline. "What's going on, Tommy?" Josh asked gently, standing beside him. Tommy didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked out at the city lights, his face a mixture of frustration and confusion. "I don't know why I'm here," he said quietly, his voice almost breaking. "I don't know why you're helping me. I'm just a kid off the streets. I don't deserve all this. I'm not like other kids." Josh's heart ached as he listened to the boy's words. "Tommy, you deserve all of this and more. You're not defined by your past. You're who you choose to be now. And right now, you're someone I care about, someone I want to help." Tommy shook his head, his eyes brimming with tears. "But what if I screw it up? What if I'm just not good enough?" Josh placed a hand on Tommy's shoulder, turning him gently to face him. "You're already good enough. You don't have to be perfect. I'm here to help you when you stumble, and I know you will. That's what family does. And I want you to be part of mine." The words hung in the air between them, and for a moment, there was nothing but silence. Tommy's tears finally spilled over, and Josh pulled him into a hug, feeling the weight of all the pain Tommy had been carrying. "It's going to be okay," Josh whispered. "You don't have to do this alone anymore." As the days passed, Tommy slowly began to open up more. He started to share bits and pieces of his past, how he had been abandoned at a young age, bounced between foster homes and struggled with feelings of worthlessness. The more he talked, the more Josh realized how deeply broken Tommy was, how much he had suffered, and how far he had come in such a short time. The journey was far from over, but Josh was determined to see it through no matter how long it took. He was committed to giving Tommy the chance at a life he had never imagined possible. That weekend, they took another trip to the auto shop, where Tommy had become a regular fixture. David had begun trusting him with more advanced tasks, and Tommy was thriving under the guidance. The boy's natural talent for mechanics was evident, and Josh couldn't help but feel proud of the progress he had made. But as they worked together that afternoon, Josh's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw that he had a message from a lawyer he had contacted a few weeks ago, someone who might be able to help Tommy with his legal situation. The message was brief, but it contained the news Josh had been waiting for: Tommy might be eligible for adoption. It wasn't guaranteed, but it was a glimmer of hope. Josh's heart raced. This was the opportunity he had been waiting for, the chance to give Tommy the stability he needed. He looked over at the boy who was busy tightening a bolt on a car engine. There was so much more to do, but in that moment, Josh knew he would do whatever it took to make Tommy's future a reality. Before going to next, please subscribe to our channel, like and share with friends. Josh couldn't shake the overwhelming sense of responsibility that weighed on him. It had been a few days since he received the message from the lawyer, and although the potential for adoption was a beacon of hope, it also brought with it a deep fear of failure. What if the system didn't allow for it? What if Tommy was torn away from him before they could solidify their bond? The uncertainty gnawed at Josh, but he pushed those thoughts aside. He had come this far and he wasn't going to back down now. Over the past months he had seen the transformation in Tommy. The boy, once a shadow of uncertainty and fear, was starting to show the promise of someone who could thrive, given the right foundation. The auto shop had become more than just a place for Tommy to work. It had become a place where he found purpose. Every day David, the owner, would teach him something new, from basic car maintenance to more complex engine work. Tommy's skill set was growing rapidly, and with every new thing he learned, Josh saw the boy's confidence rise. But it wasn't just the work that kept Tommy coming back. It was the environment. He had finally found a place where he felt valued. The camaraderie with David and the other workers, who treated him as one of their own, was a feeling Tommy had never experienced before. For the first time in his life he felt like he belonged. That morning, as Josh dropped Tommy off at the shop, he couldn't help but notice the way the boy walked. It was different now. There was a sense of purpose, of determination in each step he took. He wasn't the same young boy who had stumbled into Josh's life months ago. He was becoming someone else, someone with hope for the future. After dropping him off, Josh took a deep breath and drove to the law office. The meeting was brief, but it was everything Josh had hoped for. The lawyer explained that the process to adopt Tommy was complicated, as he had been in the foster system for several years. However, there was a chance. With the right paperwork and legal representation, Tommy could be adopted. The lawyer was confident, but Josh knew it would be an uphill battle. He couldn't afford to lose hope though. Not now, not when Tommy had come so far. He had to be the one constant in the boy's life. The next few weeks were filled with paperwork, meetings, and countless phone calls. Josh spent every free moment working with the lawyer to prepare for the adoption proceedings. It was grueling, but he knew that every effort was worth it. During this time, Tommy seemed to be thriving more than ever. He had started showing an interest in taking on more responsibility at the shop, helping with paperwork and learning about the business side of things. David, recognizing Tommy's natural leadership skills, began teaching him how to manage inventory and schedule appointments. It was clear that Tommy was beginning to see a future for himself, one where he wasn't just surviving but thriving. But the pressure of the legal battle began to take its toll on Josh. Every day the weight of the situation wore on him. He had to balance his full-time job, support Tommy, and deal with the stress of the impending adoption case. Some nights he would lie awake wondering if he was doing enough, if he was making the right choices. One evening, after a particularly long day, Josh was sitting at the kitchen table when Tommy came in, holding a small box. "Hey Josh," Tommy said, his voice unusually soft. Josh looked up, a little surprised. "What's that?" Tommy held up the box and Josh recognized it immediately. It was a model car kit, one that Tommy had shown interest in a few weeks ago. "I was thinking about how much I've learned at the shop," Tommy continued, setting the box down on the table. "And I wanted to give this to you. You know, for everything you've done for me. I never had someone like you in my life before." Josh's throat tightened and for a moment he couldn't speak. He had never expected anything from Tommy. All he had ever wanted was to help him find a better life. But Tommy interrupted him, shaking his head. "You don't have to say anything. I want you to know that I'm not the same person I was when I first came here. You've helped me more than you'll ever know." Josh felt a lump in his throat. He had never seen Tommy so open, so vulnerable. And in that moment he realized that this boy, this young man who had been through so much, was no longer a stranger in his life. He was family. "Thank you, Tommy," Josh said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've made all the difference. I'm proud of everything you've accomplished." They sat in silence for a while, the weight of their conversation settling between them. It wasn't about the car kit or the material things, it was about the bond they had built, a bond that was now stronger than ever. The following week, things started to look more promising. The lawyer had received news that the adoption case was moving forward, and there was a possibility that they could have a hearing soon. Josh's nerves were on edge, but he knew there was no turning back now. Tommy had come so far and so had he. He had a family now. Tommy had become more than just a kid he had helped. He was someone he loved, someone he wanted to see succeed. When the day of the hearing finally arrived, Josh and Tommy sat in the small courtroom, awaiting the judge's decision. The air was thick with anticipation, and Tommy's hand was trembling slightly in his. Josh squeezed it gently, offering silent support. After what felt like an eternity, the judge finally addressed them. "Mr. Blake, Mr. Turner," the judge said, his voice calm but firm, "I have reviewed the case thoroughly, and I believe that the bond between you two is strong, genuine, and in the best interest of the child. I am pleased to announce that the adoption petition has been approved." Tommy's face lit up and Josh's heart soared. It was official. Tommy was his son. And in that moment, Josh realized that all the hard work, the struggles, the sleepless nights had been worth it. He had built something beautiful out of nothing. The day Josh and Tommy had been waiting for finally arrived, and it felt surreal. The adoption papers were finalized, and the judge had given his official approval. Tommy was now officially his son. As they walked out of the courthouse together, a sense of peace settled over Josh. The months of uncertainty, the long nights of worrying about the future, and the struggle to make the adoption a reality had all led to this moment. It was more than just a legal victory, it was the beginning of a new life for both of them. Tommy had been through so much in his young life, more than anyone should have to endure. The abandonment, the foster homes, the constant feeling of being unwanted. But now he had a permanent place in Josh's life. He wasn't just a boy Josh had taken in. He was his son, and Josh was going to be there for him no matter what. Over the next few months, things slowly but steadily began to change. Tommy's confidence continued to grow, and he excelled at the auto shop. David, the shop owner, had become a mentor and a friend to both Josh and Tommy. They spent their days working together, fixing cars, learning new skills, and sharing stories. The camaraderie in the shop was a reflection of the bond Tommy had formed with the people in his life. People who saw him not as a project or a charity case but as someone with potential. At home, things were different as well. Josh and Tommy had settled into a routine. There were still moments of adjustment, especially when it came to trusting people outside their small circle, but with every passing day, Tommy was becoming more comfortable in his new life. Josh made it a priority to spend quality time with him, whether it was helping him with his homework or simply watching movies together. It wasn't always easy. Josh still had to balance work, taking care of the household, and making sure Tommy's needs were met. But he was more than willing to do it. He had learned the true meaning of fatherhood through his journey with Tommy. It wasn't about perfection. It was about being there for the person you loved, day in and day out. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, watching a baseball game, Tommy turned to Josh with a serious look on his face. "Dad, do you think I'll ever be able to do something big? I mean, like, really make a difference?" Josh smiled, feeling a lump form in his throat. "I already think you're doing something big, Tommy. Every day you're proving to yourself that you're capable of anything. And that's what matters." Tommy looked at him, his eyes full of gratitude. "I just want to make you proud," he said, his voice small but sincere. Josh's heart swelled with emotion. "You don't have to do anything to make me proud. I'm already proud of you. You've come so far." As the months passed, Tommy continued to grow, not just in his work skills but in his personal growth as well. He started taking more initiative, whether it was helping with repairs at the shop or volunteering for charity events in their community. It was clear that he was no longer the frightened, uncertain boy who had once stumbled into Josh's life. He had become a young man who believed in his own worth. One day after work, Josh and Tommy took a drive to a park near their home in Colorado Springs, where they would often go to relax and talk. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the landscape, and the air was crisp and refreshing. As they sat on a bench, overlooking the view, Tommy broke the silence. "Dad, do you think people will ever understand how much you've done for me?" Josh chuckled softly. "I don't need anyone to understand. As long as you know how much you mean to me, that's enough." Tommy nodded, a contented smile spreading across his face. "I know. And I'll never forget it. You saved me, you know?" Josh looked at Tommy, feeling a sense of fulfillment wash over him. It wasn't just the adoption or the fact that Tommy had turned his life around. It was the simple truth that they had saved each other. Tommy had brought a new sense of purpose into Josh's life. And Josh, in turn, had given Tommy the stability and love he had been longing for. Together they had built a future. Looking back on everything they had gone through, Josh knew that all the struggles, the uncertainties, and the challenges had been worth it. It wasn't just about providing for Tommy, it was about giving him a home, a family, and the belief that he was loved. And in the end, that was the greatest gift they could have ever given each other. They both had learned that the true measure of success wasn't found in money or accolades. It was found in the people you loved and the lives you touched. As they drove home that evening, the horizon ahead of them seemed brighter than ever before. Their journey was far from over, but Josh knew that as long as they had each other, they could face whatever came their way. If you've liked this story, please subscribe to our channel, like and share with friends.